The myth of the Minotaur is both one of the most raunchy stories to ever come out of Greek mythology and one of the most culturally important. In order to find out how, let's first consider a philosophical question. And the question is this: what's the worst thing that could happen if you go back on your word to somebody? I think the answer to that question is, who is it that you're going back on your word against? If it's your boss, you're probably going to get in some sort of trouble. If it's your friend, they're probably not going to speak to you for a little while, or they might not trust you going forward. But what happens if it's a god? Well, it turns out that if you go back on your word that you made to a god, you end up with a giant human flesh-eating, half man, half bull living in your basement. And if your first response to that is,
"What the fuck are you talking about?"
Don't take my word for it. Just ask King Minos of Crete, because that is exactly what happened to him when he went back on the word that he made to the god who put him on the throne. This is the myth of King Minos and the Minotaur. Let's see what happened. The story of King Minos and the Minotaur goes back to the time of the ancient Greeks. It begins with a young warrior at the time named Minos, who was said to be the son of Zeus, king of the gods, and Europa, a Phoenician princess. More on this at the end of the video. At this time, there was no set ruler on the island of Crete, and Minos desired to be king. When Minos sought to become the ruler of Crete, he prayed to Poseidon, the god of the sea, for a sign that would confirm his right to the throne. In order to secure the throne, Minos made a promise to Poseidon. He said that he would sacrifice whatever the god sent him, no matter what, as repayment for his divine blessing and his go-ahead to be the ruler of Crete. Now, it's worth noting that when humans sacrifice things to the god, particularly animals, it was said that the aroma of the sacrifice would essentially fill up the halls of Olympus, and the gods would be able to actually feast on the sacrifice. Just look at this painting here. Look at these little freaks. They love their feasts. Poseidon, being particularly hungry that day and excited for some takeaway food, answered Minos' prayers and sent him a magnificent pure white bull from the sea. This bull, known as the Cretan bull, was extraordinarily beautiful and a symbol of Poseidon's favor. Minos took this as a sign of his divine right to rule, and from that moment on, he became the king of Crete. However, when it came time to sacrifice the Cretan bull back to Poseidon, Minos decided that the bull was too beautiful and impressive to sacrifice. He basically said, I'm going to return this thing, and decided to sacrifice a regular bull to Poseidon instead. This was a very bad idea, because when Poseidon, trident in hand and ready to eat, smelled and was served a regular old bull from Earth instead of a pure white bull from the gods, he was understandably pretty upset. To betray a god was one matter, but to betray a god and mess with their food during dinner time was a whole other matter altogether, and this case was no different. Once Poseidon saw what was done, he decided to exact his revenge, and what Poseidon did in retaliation, first of all, was an incredible overreaction, and second of all, would go on to change the fate of the Greeks for generations to come. First, Poseidon cursed the Cretan bull, causing the bull to become wild and savage and to begin terrorizing the island of Crete and its inhabitants. But Poseidon was not done there. As part of Poseidon's curse, Poseidon caused Minos' wife, Pasiphae, to fall in love with the bull and to have an insane, inhuman, insatiable lust for the bull. Yeah. Now, of course, Minos had no idea that this had happened. He had just sacrificed the bull and kind of thought he'd gotten away with it. But Pasiphae, however, immediately recognized and felt this urge for the white Cretan bull and now faced a problem. Because, as mentioned, the bull was rampaging out in the fields of Crete, and to attempt to approach it straight up would be certain death for her. But it was kind of out of Pasiphae's hands at this point. She had just been cursed by a god. There was really no way to get around it. She had to have this bull. So, to get around this issue, she went to Daedalus, who was the master craftsman, and asked him to help her get close to the creature. Now, Daedalus, for his own part, of course, this is his craft. He's eager to help the queen. He's eager to display his talents. And so he did what the queen asked. He constructed a lifelike hollow wooden cow, indistinguishable from a female cow, which had just enough room for Pasiphae to fit inside. And you're probably starting to see where this is going. And Pasiphae, of course, accepted the gift excitedly, and with the help of some servants who were known to be able to keep quiet, took the construct out into the field where the bull was known to be raging, hopped inside of it, and waited until eventually the bull mated with the construct and
God, please, no! No!
the woman inside of it as well. And Pasiphae
No!
became pregnant. As a result of this union, if you want to call it that, Pasiphae bore a child unlike any other. The child she gave birth to was the Minotaur, a monstrous creature with the body of a man, but the head of a bull, which, as if that wasn't enough, was ravenous for the flesh of human beings. It was truly an abomination to both men and gods alike. Nobody could look at this thing. King Minos saw this and, obviously understandably, was repulsed, but somehow couldn't find himself willing or able to kill it. Yet he knew that he couldn't just have a human flesh-eating monster strutting around his palace, so Minos again recruited the help of Daedalus and ordered him to build a maze called the Labyrinth underneath his palace at Knossos. The labyrinth was said to be impossible to navigate as the walls within the labyrinth would continue to move and change, turning one promising way out into a dead end. Minos then imprisoned the Minotaur within it and demanded that the city of Athens send him 14 young men and women every 7 years to be thrown into the labyrinth and eaten by the Minotaur. And there the Minotaur stayed, underneath the palace of Knossos, wandering throughout the labyrinth and feeding his insatiable appetite on human sacrifices, serving as a reminder to all mortals about the dangers of breaking a vow to the gods. And that is the myth of Minos and the Minotaur. While the events in this myth certainly caused problems for the ancient Greek civilians on Crete and threatened the lives of a few Greek heroes as well, the influence of this story actually expands well beyond ancient Greece. In the film world, we see allusions to the labyrinth appear in a variety of interpretations. Harry Potter fans, for example, will recognize this as the ever-changing grand staircase at Hogwarts. What does the grand staircase do? Well, it moves, it changes paths, it gets people confused, and it leads people into confrontations with monsters, just like the labyrinth. They may also recognize the labyrinth as the Triwizard Maze in the Goblet of Fire, which, at least in the movies, is a literal labyrinth made of 20-foot tall hedges and crawling with creatures and illusions aimed to hinder each of the champions' ability to navigate through the maze. Finally, the labyrinth also makes its appearance in the films such as The Maze Runner, which there should be no surprise there. This is a dystopian film and novel where a group of teenagers are trapped in a constantly changing maze with monsters hiding within the maze and hunting whoever finds themselves lost. The labyrinth is honestly everywhere. Oh yeah, it's also in the movie The Labyrinth. As for the Minotaur, this abomination of human behavior has also fascinated artists and poets throughout the ages. For example, the Minotaur makes an appearance in Dante's Inferno. In his epic poem, The Divine Comedy, Dante places the Minotaur as a guardian of the seventh circle of hell, where the souls of the violent are punished by this creature. And we're not done there. Carl Jung, the psychologist, also referred to the Minotaur and the labyrinth in his teachings on psychology. He often referred to the labyrinth as the inner self, or a person's inner psyche that needs to be navigated in order to fully understand themselves. And the Minotaur, well, that was the representation of a person's shadow self, or the bestial urges and energies that we need to fear and keep hidden away. Pablo Picasso, also as normal as he was also fascinated by the Minotaur, with over 70 depictions of the monster between the 1920s and the 1950s. This is my favorite one right here. Look at him go. He doesn't seem that scary. Suffice it to say, this myth has inspired artists, storytellers, and playwrights throughout the ages and has given us a lot of material that we can still enjoy today. And speaking of how the effects of the myths are still alive and well today, check out this myth of King Minos' parents, Zeus and Europa, which tell the tale of Minos' birth and how the continent of Europe was named. Otherwise, until next time, thank you for watching.